Welcome, everybody, to another special edition of the Yankees Farm Report. We are back to do a review of the recently completed 2026 Major League Amateur Draft, in which the Yankees selected and signed 20 players. We're going to talk about those players tonight. We're going to make some general commentary about the draft, and we're going to also talk about the nine undrafted free agents that the Yankees signed and why we should not be ignoring them just because they didn't get their names called on Saturday or Sunday. All right, so we're going to start with some overview thoughts here about the draft, and we'll start with you, Aaron, here because you on the website you went deep on these 20 players and gave us some insight about them, so you have an overall feel for this draft class. What's your impression of it, of the group?
Yeah, definitely using what I had kind of studied on each player before the draft, and then some of the guys who I didn't really get in on after they were drafted. I wrote a prospect notebook, kind of just giving the quick and rundown on all 20 guys. Listen, I really like this draft class. If you listen to Bobby and myself and you 2 weeks ago, we were saying how we were definitely leaning hitter early, just because they need the bats and it's thin on the system, and they develop pitching so well, and they can turn these late round guys to gems. And while that's true, I kind of started thinking to myself, if the pitching development Sam Breen can turn like a Ford into a Ferrari, what happens if you give them like already pristine parts with the first two picks? And what happens if you give them a Dietz and Duncan and what they can spew out there? Like they could be really special pitchers and high upside guys. I love Jack Siebert. I like Mac Hugh. I like Rory Fox. There's plenty of them. But like these aren't, these guys are a lot more raw or don't have as loud of stuff, and you're just giving them two strong weapons that they can really make top end starters. So I do, after kind of the shock of it, I do like that. But just in general, I love all the pitchers they took. They took some guys with funky release slots who have a lot of good, whether it's maybe some guys have less velocity, some guys have more, some guys have outlier traits in their movement profiles. There's some guys who go over the top, some guys who have low release points. It's just all these guys I really am interested in. I think they all could be good pitchers, even, if they develop right. I really like what I could see out of all of them as a starter or reliever in the pros. The bats, I was hoping for a little bit more hit amongst the guys, especially the guys taken. Those are more power profiles over hit, and I feel like the Yankee system is a little thin on hit, but they got a couple guys in the later rounds that I think could fill that. Um, so they did add a lot of bats, which is good. It's just maybe not as high profile as we are hoping for, but when your bread and butter's pitching, you can't really complain when they take pitchers.
It's a good point. And, to your point, they're not just throwing darts. I mean, they know what they like and they can identify it.
Yeah.
And so you got to think if these are the guys they selected, that they've found something that they like with each one of them. So, something interesting about this class, Bobby, was the Yankees took four high schoolers, and that's not typical for them. So, what do you make of that strategy?
I think, excuse me, I think this was something that was we talked about in last week's show or whatever, it was 2 weeks ago. I think this is something that you saw it more this year than probably any other time. It's like the Wizard of Oz. The curtain was actually pulled back, and I think a lot of these deals with the high school players were made maybe a week in advance, maybe even 2 weeks in advance. I know that, I was using the Overslot mock draft simulator, and one of the times I put out there, I think I actually selected was looking in depth Kutchel, and his value was, I think at that point, 850,000. How did they sign him for $150,000? I don't know. We do mention that they usually include atop of that college education, right? So you're going to be taken care of. Um, Now, like I said, to get, it's quite interesting where they got these kids from. They got one from the Rio Grande region. They got one that's real. Cutchall is about 20 minutes outside of Clemson, so he's in the deep south. Um, and Lee, I think is how you say his name, Garris?
Garris,
Garris
I hope
is
so.
from Virginia Beach area, but I think he was going to go to James Madison, so he was not going to a high school, a bigger, SEC type school. How they pull this together is probably, the names that we talked about 2 weeks ago, they went for a lot higher. We were talking about Jackson Willits. That would have been a perfect fit. I think I saw him signing today for $100,000 more than his slot. I think he was in the fifth round. That's just one example. So the way they looked at this draft was, picks 1 through 6, really seven were, okay. They did save some money, with Contreras and Pettit, and then they went low with picks 8 and 9 to take that money. But when the real story comes out is you know how in the heck do they get three hitters, and we saw when it came to Drew Gonzalez, he was scouted by the Orioles, the Dodgers, and the Red Sox. So it wasn't, there's some good systems looking at him, and he still signed for a little above slot. So it's quite interesting. I'm going to echo on what Aaron said. Usually I'm very skeptical on drafts, on how they draft, but this was like a scientific dissection on how to draft 20 rounds with four high school players. And Dietz was somebody I didn't even put in my radar because I figured he was going to be gone by 20.
Yeah.
So to get him signed and then to see the players, I was looking at, like, could it, I thought they were going to maybe go to a Mason Edwards because they're familiar, or a Redmond if they were going to sign the pitchers. But they actually, I believe, signed as equal or more. So when they probably, when they probably called, and he was talking about it, Dietz was calling, like they called him up prior to, I think, pick 25 or 28, and he mentioned, would you be willing to be a Yankee? At that point, you kind of know what the money is. So it was pretty fascinating. But like I said, I really would like to know the scouts who sign, the three high school bats. Like, I want to know that backstory because that is highly, highly unusual that they signed for those numbers.
Yeah, and it's like you said, this is a puzzle that gets put together prior to the
Yeah.
draft. And unlike other drafts where, maybe in football, one pick doesn't affect your next pick, in baseball, it does. The guy you take in the first round is going to affect the guy that you might take in the third or the fourth, and not because of the position he plays. And so, speaking of that first round pick, or its equivalent at number 35 here, Kai, because the three of us can see so well into the future, all of us were prognosticating hitters being taken with the Yankees' first pick. And I know for me, I was just trying to manifest that because that's what I prefer. And so they made us look smart by taking a pitcher and then doing it again with their second pick. What do you make of pitcher at the top of the draft, which again is not typical for the Yankees?
I mean, I was one of the many people who were just like, oh, Daniel Jackson, the shiny toy put in front of you, kind of that type of thing. So like I was there with hitter, but like you said, Dietz was certainly best available. He dropped a little bit, and it's a pitching organization, so might as well get richer. If you're a lefty arm that could be a high end starter in your organization, I just thought like I came back to think much better on it than obviously I was like, it's a great pick, and I was like this they could do a lot with him. And like Aaron said, like what can they do when they're given shiny good parts instead of, some of the later parts. So um I was just really excited about the Deets after looking more into it. I had watched a couple of his starts throughout the year just in general. Um and I mean this was his breakout year and he looked good. He's a big guy. He throws hard. Like he looks like he can project to maybe even gain some velo. You never know. So um the rich get richer in the pitching organization. So, and I'm excited what they can do with him. And then Duncan, the exact same thing, like pitching organization, a guy that a lot of people really liked, and then they got obviously him to sign, and that they can do a lot with. And there's a lot to look forward to. Obviously, he's super young. It's different than Dietz. You're talking about a high school kid. So like. He is a Tommy John guy, if I'm not mistaken. I think he just got Tommy John. So
May,
like
yeah.
you're thinking a little farther down the road, but there was so much to like in him, and if I had heard his name before the draft, that's how I knew that I should be excited. So especially as a high school kid, so um, I'm just excited about the pitching in this organization, and they're so damn good at it. So at developing, so I'm excited about the later round pick. So it's like Aaron said, it's even more to be excited about the first rounder basically.
Yeah, and
Here's a
we're gonna talk.
question.
Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
here. Have the Yankees ever taken a guy out of Canada before until Sean Duncan?
Yeah, geez, it was
I
an
can't think.
outfielder. Was it Sanford? Was that the last one that you
No, I
Jake
think
Sanford?
I don't know. Was he was from Canada? Then he went back to Canada
But he
after the
was in
scandal.
college.
Okay,
Yeah,
Hmm.
but that's the only one I could
It's
think
just
of.
yeah, he
yeah.
went back
It's
there.
just
But
it's such
yeah,
an
they have
interesting pick
drafted
though.
out of Canada before. I know
Hmm.
in the past. I'm just trying to think of one that comes to my mind. But obviously the kid likes the Yankees. I mean, that's what we were hearing that he's been a Yankee fan. But he didn't give them any. He didn't do them any favors. I'll tell you that.
No,
But
I mean,
that
listen, he was a guy who was a projected late first rounder, and he got 2.5 million, which is he got the same bonus as Hunter Dietz, but and that comes out to around I think the 39th overall pick bonus pool. So yeah, he got selected like the very end of the first round,
well,
which is so
that's
it
what I
makes
wanted to
sense.
ask about. So 7 pitchers, 12 hitters, one two-way player. And I saw a tweet saying, "Oh, the Yankees emphasized bats in this draft." Did they? If two-thirds of their bonus pool went to two pitchers, what do you think about that?
You, you know what? I was going to actually, I don't know. I've been kind of putting this out there. I think, it's like stuff we don't know behind the scenes, right? Like there's like we're going to see this in the next 2 weeks with the trade deadline, I think. There is so much talent in the Florida, the rookie ball, the Florida League, and in the DSL, right? There's so many bats that are 18, 19 years old that are going to have to play, and whether they're going to be, closing teams down, minor league teams down because of the new CBA, we don't know that. But there is a wealth of talent, and I think the way the international free agent scouting the groups since the takeover back, I guess, in February or March, they seem to have their act together now. So even though they have only got, these bats, I think, I was trying to play it like, place them. They have 9 spots for them, right? So you can't get more bats if you don't have the team to put them on. That's
But
what it's coming.
yeah, and I don't want to derail the conversation because I was going to save this for the end. So that's 29 signed players. You have
Yep.
165 limit on your roster. I don't believe they count against that until they play or until the World Series is over. So
Hmm.
we're going to see a lot of movement here in the next, well, I got the trade deadline and I don't want to send the conversation this direction. We can talk about this in another episode. I don't feel like the system has a lot of dead weight where you could say, well, there's a guy you can get rid of and there's a guy you can get rid of. I'm sure you can make
Well,
those arguments, but
I
that's a
think there's one
lot of
key thing
players
to
coming into the
remember.
system.
I think one key thing to remember is most of these pitchers aren't gonna. I mean, obviously we know Duncan isn't gonna be able to
Yeah,
throw
we
just
won't
for
see
his
them till next year.
UCL, but yeah, I mean, maybe you'll see. Obviously Jack Seaver pitched last year, Tyler Boudreauxi. I bet we'll see like three, four, five of these guys between the draftees and the UDFAs. But you're right, the hitters are gonna get to go. Um, and it's yeah, it's definitely kind of that. I mean, it touches every organization. This
Yeah,
is just kind of the natural, part of any organization is you get new people in, people come out. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But
Yeah.
the hitting talent they did get, while it wasn't, we didn't get any of the elite stock, they did fill some need with catching depth, getting 2 catchers. They got some outfielders, which they also needed, and there's still interesting guys. Like I think there's a bunch of them are future value 45, which means they're good platoon bets for the pros. Maybe they'll reach with. I think some of them have upwards projection of 50, 55 if they really reach their top outcome. So it's not like they didn't get good bat talents. It's just there's more work to do with them.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about Hunter Dietz, the first pick that the Yankees had? I mean, this is like you were saying before, it's not a guy we paid a lot of attention to because we expected him to be gone by the time the Yankees picked. And there's a reason for that. So let's talk about what he brings to the table as a pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, just going through his repertoire. So mainly in college, he was fastball, slider, curveball. Fastball was sitting between 95, 97. It's had a 17 to 18 inches of vertical break, which is pretty good, but that's going to come down with the pro ball. So it'll be more average-ish shape, which makes me curious. The Yankees love to tinker with fastball shapes. I do wonder if maybe a sinker is put in there, or even a cutter. But all the fastball, even if it doesn't rate as well when it gets to a pro baseball, the slider and curveball are just too delectable offering. Like they're gonna get a lot of swing and miss. And this is a guy who was eighth. His 36.2 K percentage was, I believe, eighth overall in college baseball. And he didn't have an awful walk rate. I mean, there is some issues with getting the zone consistently, but it's not like he can't locate. It's not, I don't want to say Carlos Legrand levels, but it's close. He's comfortable throwing strikes, even though there is work to do. So this is a big guy with nasty stuff. I think one of the things they can work on is him getting into his legs more. He has a pretty quiet motion for the most part. He's not someone who falls all the way over to third base. He kind of just, has his leg dangling there, but he stays, central to the hitter, which I like. But I think there's more, using his legs to help get better extension, help, get better velocity. But yeah, it's when you're talking about a guy who throws upper 90s, has two elite breaking pitches, and from the left side, it's a really interesting mix, and you can see why. Even if he did just pitch 1 year, why he was a guy who's talked about kind of, into the top 20-25 range.
And a big physical guy too. So you
Yeah,
mentioned the
six
way I've heard
six.
it is he's more control than he is command, but it's power stuff. So it's if
Mhm.
there's control with the power stuff, then maybe the command comes along.
My big thing for Dietz obviously is the 1 year. So like, only 4 games across his first 2 years and 16 starts this year. So I've seen a lot of people mention that we're probably not going to see him pitch this year because he got ran a little bit by the Arkansas coaching staff. So like, um, just excited to see it. Not excited, I guess. Like, just interested to see his how durability goes for him in his like, as his pro career starts. Obviously, we've only seen the 1 year, and um, obviously, like I said, we're probably not going to see him this year. So
I
And it
think
wasn't TJ he had. It was
Stress
no,
one of the
fracture.
times like a stress fracture in the
yep.
elbow. And so obviously it's not fun to hear, but
Yeah.
it isn't the ligament or
Yeah,
shoulder.
yeah. If he is healthy, there's no doubt in my mind. If he's healthy, this time next year, there's going to be talk about him possibly being in some part on the major league roster. He reminds me a lot like Peyton Tolley. He is the same kind of build. I think he throws harder. He's not as bigger, like weight wise. He should start at high A and move to, double A pretty quickly. I think it's like anything. It's like, fastball control. If he's got control, but he's definitely, I think right now, one of the top three, and the top, lefty in the system. I mean, um, he is really that good, I mean, and it doesn't take a lot for him to get even better. Like I said, he's throwing 94 to 96. You add 2 miles on finger placement to a fastball, and you go into 96 to 98. You're really then getting into that range where you're talking about some elite stuff. So, like, MLB Pipeline had him at 17. Like, we got him double amount of picks later. That's pretty freaking good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen him inside the top 15 of draft prospects going back and taking a look. And speaking of guys that are highly regarded, Duncan, I think, fits that bill. I haven't found anybody say anything bad about him other than
But
he's had Tommy John surgery, but that's not a comment on his pitching. And Kylie McDaniel gave us a little tip on that ahead of time that the Yankees were into him, and then that came
Mhm.
to fruition. So what is it that you think they like about him?
I mean, when you get outside like the top college, the high school arms, like Gio Rojas was the top high school pitching arm this year. When you start talking about a lot of high school guys, you're talking about guys who either have big stuff, but don't really have any idea where it's going, or you have that's Brody Bumilla, who we were talking about as a potential first rounder up as well. And then you have guys who have pretty good control, but don't really have much stuff. And I think Duncan is a really interesting mix. Yeah, he doesn't throw upper 90s. His fastball had been sitting 90 to 92, but he had bumped it up to around 93 to 95, been as high as 97 before his injury. But he also had, is a slider and changeup, and he commands all of it really well. So he has like a really nice, he's a pitcher. He is a pitcher. Um, Obviously, there's work to do with both improving the stuff and improving some of the control. If you've watched him pitch, he has kind of a weird long arm motion, so there is some cleaning up to do. Of course, he's 18 years old, um, but he's just a really nice balanced profile where I think when he gets going, he could honestly kind of go quick just because there is that polish of a guy who can throw strikes and can get swing and miss. So it is really, I think that's probably a big draw to it. Is just he's a really polished high school arm. It's just now you have to wait a little bit to get him because of the surgery.
Which is maybe why. So you mentioned Brumilla, who signed for 2.75, and the reaction to that is, "Oh, that is risky."
Yeah.
And here are the Yankees signed the guy who had TJ, and it's 2.5, but you don't hear any of that talk about how risky it is.
Yeah.
Isn't
Well,
Vermilla
the
on his
difference is
second?
Bumilla had internal
Yeah,
brace.
Yeah.
isn't he on
That's
the
his second
second?
injury. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no
Bumilla
question.
had internal. He had internal brace and then TJ a year later, which is
Yeah.
that's a little bit more worrisome than just I think TJ's a rite of pass. I even said it in here. I think in my article, TJ's a rite of passage for pitchers. Um, so it definitely is a little not great that he's already had it at 18, but Clark Schmidt was rehabbing from the surgery when we drafted him in 2017, and obviously he had to get it again, but he was a pretty darn good pitcher, so it's not like a death knell.
No, and I think that speaks to the conviction
Yeah.
the organization sees the work
Mhm.
ethic and the desire and probably the, well, we know what he looks like when he's
Yeah.
healthy,
And
and we
I could
believe
say
he'll get
this
back
about
to
the
that.
National. I can say this about the Nationals. Mike Rizzo loved
Oh yeah.
taking Tommy John, and Lucas Giolito was the first of that, and he worked out tremendously. Obviously, being a
You
part of
know
the
who
Adam Eaton trade, that
you know who you
Eric
remind me
Fedde
of? I don't
wasn't
know.
as good, but
I don't know if you guys I'm a little older, but when he came out of college, Cole Hamels, when he came out of not college, high school, and I guess in the
Mhm.
04-05 draft, he only had something. If you check his stats, his minor league stats, he only had something like 200, maybe 300 innings, and then he was on the Phillies. He had Tommy John, and then he had like a shoulder injury, and then he's on the Phillies. So
Mhm.
Duncan might be someone we don't see maybe the end of July, August of next year, and then in 28, right? By 29, we're
Mhm.
talking about him possibly being MLB ready. Like that, it could be like that. I mean, that's also best case
Mhm.
scenario. Yes, I get it, right? But I remember Hamels being drafted, and then all of a sudden he's always injured, and then next thing you know, he's on the Phillies, and then you know what happens next.
And he would be an outlier for the Yankees because, give me a name that I'm forgetting, but I'm trying to think of the last high school pitcher they took that got far, like
Salvage.
Brock Selvage is the made it to double A. Maybe, I don't know if he had a brief appearance in triple A at all before he got hurt, but I can't remember a high school pitcher getting farther than that recent vintage for the Yankees.
No,
No. So
I mean
he
you're looking back to like Phil Hughes, right?
yeah, that's the well, unless you want to
Anthony and
count
Kennedy,
Garrett
or
Cole
Ian
in
Kennedy
there,
was in
but
high
he
school.
he didn't sign, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a guy that they targeted. If that word leaked early, then you can tell that this is somebody they had in mind. And like you said earlier, they had something worked out with him before the draft. They know what they're getting into, and they know what they like. So it's easier for us to like them. All right. So Bobby, how about our third round pick here, Brendan Brock? This is an interesting guy with an interesting profile.
Yeah, I mean he spent like the past 2 years in junior college. I think he tore up the numbers in terms of, I think he had something like 2020, which in junior college is not unusual, but I think he did it back-to-back years or something like that. And it seems he always wanted to go to Oklahoma, was in Oklahoma. He seemed like the Oklahoma team this year, besides winning the College World Series, was filled with a lot of talent. They had multiple catchers. It seemed like they had multiple guys could play different positions, third base, center field, catcher, outfield, all these other things that were going on there. But the thing about Brock is something that, like they say all the time, you can't teach speed. Multiple outlets have him as a 70 runner. Like that is something you don't see, right? If he's truly a 70 runner, um, do I think his future is at catcher? I don't think so, per se. I think, he'll be somebody that's be working the outfield. The biggest thing is the ability to make contact, right? I think there is power that you could see there. Um, I think was it Oppenheimer that compared him to another Philly? What was his name? The outfielder on the '09 team with the beard.
Worth.
No,
Jason Worth.
Jason Worth, that's it. Exactly. Exact. Thank you, Marcus. Jason Worth, that who came up as a catcher, was but just a really great athlete. They put him in left field. And if you look at Jason Worth's numbers, like if we're
Masher.
even getting anything close out of Brock like this, you're talking
Yeah.
about like a steal.
Yeah.
So the thing that I really like about the pick is that he's really athletic, right? And could they keep him a catcher? Sure, possibly, yeah. But I think we're gonna hear about him being in the outfield. If he, you see what Jackson Lovich is doing, right? In high, or excuse me, low A. Could he, he struck out a lot, strikes out a lot, but he's been hitting the ball, getting, home runs and stuff. If he could produce something like this plus the speed, I think you're looking at it. Now, I think one of the organizations, maybe BA, had him as high as number 12 in their ranking. I don't think he's that high. In my opinion,
Oh,
I
for the
still think,
organization. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I don't think he's per se that high. I think he's maybe more in the 15 to 20 range, but he's somebody that I'm going to be like dying to see what he does. And I think he should start playing within the next 2 weeks. So I think you're talking about like mid August. He should have some run in Florida.
And when we discussed before the draft, the organizational need perhaps for catchers because of the number they've traded the last couple of years, we mentioned that this might be a draft where we see some catchers show up. They announced him as a catcher, but the fact that his standout tool is run, I'm wondering if he's catcher, not an everyday catcher as they develop him, but catcher which makes him a really interesting profile if in fact that's what they do with him.
I mean, it's possible. You look in low way right now. Luis Puello, Angel Arena, and David McCann are all catchers. But you got to get them in the lineup. So David
Yep,
McCann plays some first base, one will DH. So you could very well see, hey, you'll catch, twice a week, and then we'll have him in the outfield.
good point.
I mean, we'll have to see how it happens. But you're right. The announcing them as catcher did stick out.
I think if they didn't draft the guy after him or two picks after him, then I would give it a little more legs. But they seem to, and I don't want to speak it out of turn, but they seem to really like Bear Harrison, right? So that's the only reason why I'm saying that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so Aaron, the fourth round pick, Paul Contreras out of Cal Fullerton. What do we know
Mhm.
about him?
Yeah, so this is a guy who was when they took him, maybe it was a bit of a reach. They obviously got some savings on him to help pay for Duncan and Gonzalez and Garris. But for kind of reaching, I think they got really good value. This is a guy who is very old school. He doesn't wear any gloves in the box. He has a very kind of, I don't want to say still, but just very. There's not a lot of movement in his stance. He's not doing anything funny at the plate. And he's just been shown to be a really good hitter. He's had great contact rates. There's some power there, for sure, that you could see like a 15 to 20 home run guy. And he's a really solid fielder. He's probably more of a right fielder because he doesn't have great speed or great arm. Excuse me, he does have a strong arm, which is why you can see him as a right fielder very well. The one thing to note is, playing at Cal State Fullerton. wasn't obviously playing the best velocity. And when he was seeing better velocity, it's not that he couldn't hit it, but you saw a lot more stuff going to right field than the other way. And it's just about, can you start pulling that stuff? Because that's as we talk about plenty on here, pull air, pulling the ball in the air for is the best way to hit for power. And so just how he can make the jump, the velocity will be the most interesting thing. But I think this is just a really steady contributor. I think he's a guy who will definitely post really good results, and maybe he's a weak side platoon. Maybe he can develop into a starter, but I just think he's a nice little piece to help fill some of the outfield voids they have.
And he's on the younger side for the class, right?
Yeah, he was, I believe, yeah, not 21 till August, so he's got a little bit more time to go. But yeah, so
And it's
definitely helps
weird to
out.
say for a draftee that I mean they're all arrow up, they're all on the ascent, but some guys you catch them at different parts of their development. He might be one of those guys who, if he stayed in college a little bit longer, the conversation about him next year looks different. So and they take him in the fourth round. That's not time to start cutting money. There's
Mhm.
obviously something there that they like. Now, how about Kai Bear Harrison, who I think the Yankees, like Bobby said, do like?
Yeah, Bobby mentioned, and I would have to say Tanner Swanson agreed. He reposted some of my stuff on Bear, so big fact that they like him. He did not do that to Brock, so I think big fact that he like that they like him as a catcher, and as like the catcher of their draft. He's definitely like the catcher prototype guy, bigger guy, big bat, probably gonna have some swing and miss stuff in the pros, but he was fine in 37 strikeouts to 41 walks in this last year, so like not terrible, but um, and like with Tanner Swanson, I was reading on Aaron's thing, a room to grow defensively, and with Tanner Swanson, I trust him in the catching development and the work that they've put in the last couple of years, and like you said, all those bats and catchers that we've traded away the last couple deadlines. There was a need to fill the hole. Um, and I really like him as a big bopping catcher, someone that can be hopefully average to slightly above average and defensively, and give you homers at a solid clip because he's not going to be hitting for average or anything like that. So um, I'm just excited about him, as I'm sure the catching team is in the organization. So I'm excited to see him specifically start hitting. I'm excited for just another catcher. Like like obviously it's tough. We think about the major leagues and the catching is not good at the major league level, and obviously he's not going to be coming near the major league team anytime soon. But it's always good to refill the farm, especially when it was so good and so strong just a couple years ago.
Yeah, and not to sell him short, but that's at least a major league backup profile. If he can
Yeah.
catch and he's got power, right-handed power. And I'm sorry, I know his real name's not Bear, but he's got to get to the big leagues if he goes by Bear Harrison. That's a sweet name. So
One of my favorite names in the
yeah,
draft,
yeah, that's got to be worth at
Yeah.
least a cup
especially
of
for a
coffee.
catcher, big burly catcher.
You can only catch or play first base if your name is Bear. I'm sorry. All right, so
I think
getting
the
into,
out.
sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Never mind. I think the outcome you're hoping for is, 220 guy with, 10% walk rate and 25 home runs, because that's his calling card is the power, and he has pretty good plate discipline. So yeah, it might not be a guy who hits for average, but you're getting 20 plus home runs in the back of the lineup and good catching. That's what we want from Wells. And obviously he hasn't, he delivered that for the most part last year, hasn't this year.
Yeah,
But yeah, so that's just kind of, what I'm hoping to see from him, because he's never going to hit for average.
which
But I'd be
as
shocked if he did.
and now and nowadays that's going to be a comment for just about everybody that he's not going to hit for average, or we'll have to redefine what hitting for average means. So the next group of players here, rounds 6 through 10, the Yankees took Andrew Gonzalez, a high school third baseman, in the sixth round. Michael Harpster, a right-handed pitcher from East Tennessee State, in the seventh round. Some kid nobody's ever heard of named Luke Pettit, who's a two-way player out of Dallas Baptist. Ninth round, David Leslie, a right-handed pitcher from Pittsburgh. And then in the 10th round, I hope I'm saying his name right, is Bayram Hott, a shortstop from Louisville. So let's dive into some of these players here. And Aaron, out of that group of five, who's a guy you can give us some insight on?
Yeah, I will say my favorite pick in the entire draft class is Michael Harpster. I think the Yankees got a very exciting arm. I thought he could have been a fourth round pick. When you look at his college stats, and just if anyone's aware, teams don't really really care about college stats. They're looking more for stuff. So when drafted Ben Hess, he had like a 5 ERA. But Harpster had a 4.34 ERA, 4.39 FIP, 24.5 K percent, 11.3 walk percent. Um, and this was at a mid-major program. So you see those numbers, you're like, weird. And he's not a big guy. He's only 6 foot. But what he does on the mound is just very interesting. He's a low slot guy, so he gets, a very flat approach angle, which makes the fastball harder to see. And it also gets a lot of horizontal movement, which makes it harder for hitters to get to. And it only sits 90-92, but it can definitely get a little bit higher, and the Yankees will definitely work to get more velocity out of it. Um, but like I said, just having a flat approach angle just is such a tricky area. Jack Siebert's someone who has a low release angle like that. It's tough, especially when you can mix your pitch as well. And he already has a high 80s cutter, and you just see those two pitches together, and that's just what the Yankees love. They love that overlay between the fastball, the cutter. If they can get a sinker in there too, I would not be shocked to see them get that sinker in. Then he has a really nice changeup, or excuse me, sweeper, and then he has a changeup in progress. You're looking at a potential five-pitch pitcher with a Triforce fastball, and he already holds two of them really well. And this year, he was making some changes with his delivery, getting a little bit more extension down the mound. And it probably caused his control to be a little bit off because he had been better with it in the past. But it's just when you're talking about a guy in this area of the draft, especially the sixth through eighth rounds, the Yankees love their pitchers. Will Warren, Cam Schlittler, Chase Hampton. Obviously, he's been a little derailed by injury, but there's a lot. This is a big round for the Yankees, and I just think Harpster has, when you know what the Yankees are looking for. You kind of mentioned at the beginning, this is very much that profile with a low release, has the multiple fastballs, decent command, more room for velocity. But even without the velocity, his pitch shapes are so sharp that they can kind of overcome some of the potential lack of velocity.
And like you said, that rounds 5 or 6 through 10 in recent years, we're looking for that pitcher. And you would say this is the guy where it's like, there he is. That's the one we're going to keep our eye on. And is off the top of my head, he's 6 feet tall. That's what he's
Yeah,
listed at?
that's according to Overslot. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so Bobby, that guy that we haven't heard of before, I wonder if you're going to talk about him a little bit.
I never heard of the guy before. I think
Weird
it's
last name.
weird last name, Cajun last name.
Yeah.
So Luke Pettit, I think if Luke Pettit was healthy this year, he had Tommy John. He did bat this year, and he had actually a very good year. He had 16 home runs. Um, but as a pitcher, I think that's where his calling card is. I think he might be batting when he is, when they release the rosters in a couple of weeks in Tampa. But I think probably next spring we're going to see more articles about him on the mound. And if he did pitch this year for, I think he was when he went to Dallas Baptist University, I think would have been probably a second or third round pick. I mean, he's got, not just the pedigree, but then, in the last name, but he's someone who could pitch, right? And um, I think it really comes down to, is he going to be healthy to pitch, right? And once they clear him and everything, and he's back on the mound, we're gonna, like I said, hear more about him being the pitcher than being the hitter. I think the two-way thing right now is just a cool thing. I don't see it being more than, like, let's say this season, because his calling card is as on the mound. And it's really unfortunate that we didn't see him pitch this year in college, because I thought, that was a good place for him where he could have really shown his stuff and could have been a top 60, 70 pick in the draft. What I do find curious is that he did save the Yankees some money. And I wonder if that's something that was, like I said, this was pre, draft talked about. He could have stayed in school. And come out as a senior. Like more and more, we're hearing now kids staying in school at age 22, right? And getting that NIL money. He doesn't need a dollar the rest of his life, all right? But he took a cut, and he helped, save the Yankees hide in some way. Let's see, what comes of him.
But he is a legitimate prospect. This is not a legacy pick. This
Like
is
a
not a, hey, this
No,
would be cool because his dad played for the Yankees. He's a legitimate prospect on his.
there's no doubt. If you look a couple of years ago at scouting, what they projected this year's draft, he was in the top like 100. So he was somebody that was going to be, if he didn't have Tommy John, a easily top 100 pick. So the top 3 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we got a guy here out of this bucket of players, Kai, that you want to talk about?
I'm gonna talk about D3 Jesus, David Leslie. I found out that was his nickname when I did my original work on him, and I just found that hilarious. I don't know how you get that.
I don't know if that tops
Nick.
Bear Harrison or not, but that's a pretty good one.
Um, like I said, D3 obviously he pitched there for 3 years before his first year in D1 this year with Pitt. Um, and while Aaron said like it's not always about the result pitchers this level like he had some struggles. It's 6.37 ERA and a 1.6 WHIP, but um 75 strikeouts in 65 innings. He's got a high arm slot and a good curveball from what I've seen. That especially obviously come helps. It's a good 12 from that arm angle. Um, and just in general, I guess for him, like he's gonna be a bullpen guy, and his fastball's low to mid 90s. I mean, Aaron, you might know a little bit more on him to just on thoughts of what he could be for the organization going forward. But I
Yeah.
did like what I see. I did like what I see when I watched pitch wise, especially that curveball and coming from that arm angle, it looked really solid.
Yeah, I mean, obviously different rounds, and Leslie was kind of picked in the mind as saving money.
Hmm.
But I look back at Ben Grable, who was, he was also 23 when the Yankees drafted him last year, and was higher arm slot, good fastball, um, and they've made him a true elite relief weapon. Like he's just been amazing in Double A now for like 2 months. But I see a fastball that sits 92, 94. Maybe there's I know Ben Grable talked about there were some inefficiencies in his delivery, and the Yankees sorted that out, and all of a sudden he's throwing 95, 97. I wonder if there's some of that with Leslie. If you get him throwing mid to upper 90s with that 12-6 curveball, I'm not sure if they're going to start him out as a reliever, but he feels like a guy who, if you put him there, you could kind of find that same recipe as Grable did. It's definitely, these ninth and tenth rounds are weird because the Yankees always use this as a big money saving spot, taking a super senior. And it's so different with Leslie, but that doesn't mean, you can't find something interesting with it.
It's funny you say that. When they made this pick, that was my first thought. Is this, can this be the 2026 Ben Grable? Because Ben Grable might have ruined it for all guys that they're going to use as relievers out of the draft.
Yeah, it's like Cam Schlittler for the Cam Schlittler with
Right.
oh yeah, get this guy throwing his fastball harder like Cam
Yeah.
Schlittler. No, Ben
Harpster, you need to be
Grable.
Cam Schlittler now. All right. So 11 through 15, rounds 11 through 15. Uh, Anthony Potestio, I should probably say, shortstop for University of California, San Diego. His 11th rounder, Austin Bergeron, a right-handed pitcher from Miami of Ohio, was round 12. Round 13, a high school outfielder named Lee Garris. 14th round was Diego Castellanos, an outfielder from St. Mary's. And then the 15th round, William Cutshall, another high school shortstop. So, what do we think here, Bobby, out of that group of five? Who's the guy that you want to touch on?
I think the two high school players, I mean, Garris was somebody from, like I said, the Tidewater area who signed more than Kutchel, which I find very hard to believe. But both of them, I mean, Kutchel had more of a pedigree behind him Garris, there's not really much about him. I watched some videos. Some, news people, said that he just newsreels, I mean, from the Tidewater area, and they just said like he just had a great season. I think he was either the first team All Virginia, and he was going into James Madison. He seems like he's an outfielder, but you don't really get much more than that from that. So somebody obviously seen something in him to give him the 300,000. And well, like I said, these are just straight up lottery tickets. We don't know what's going to happen after that.
Yeah.
Hopefully they become something.
And how about on the Cutshaw side here, Kai? What do
Yeah,
we know about him?
quickly before we go to Cutsall, I watched a video of Lee Garris. In I think it was like a regional playoff game or something, but he couldn't start the game because of a back injury, but they brought him in to pinch hit and he hit a game-winning home run opposite field. So just obviously a fun high school thing to watch and
Yeah.
tough to hear about back injuries though as a young kid.
Yeah.
Um, um, Cutshaw, like you just mentioned, had a little bit more pedigree coming in, and he was an Ole Miss commit. So like as a 15th rounder, a lot of people were thinking it's going to be hard to pull you from a top program in of all of college, and they did. So that was obviously a surprise to many. Anybody know off the top where how much he signed for? I mean,
He just
150.
signed for
150.
the 150. Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't get any bonus.
yeah. So I mean. I for sure was surprised. I thought when there was a lot of people talking about if they could sign all 20, I thought he was very on the fence, if not heading to Ole Miss. So, but I've watched some of the videos. He's got a lot of perfect game video out there. One of them's at Steinbrenner Field, ironically. Um, interesting looking swing when you watch. I read in Aaron's thing, and it's hard to agree. Like, will the swing struggle against maybe better competition? And that's what I just happened to see when I watched obviously limited video, as we said. Same thing with Garris. Like, it's high school kids. It's very hard to watch some stuff on these guys.
Hmm.
But I just think the biggest thing for him was signing. I was very surprised that they got him to sign um and now you see how everything plays from there, position wise, all that stuff. He's somewhere in the infield, I assume. So um
You
I'm
know,
excited. What do you say?
I was gonna say one thing I think that we're seeing we saw in this draft with these high school players is that I think the Yankees, compared to other teams where you go to those top 100 high school kids, were out, or top 75, went to really focus on maybe the 100 to 200 and gave them a lot of love and attention and build that relationship where, one was going to go to Texas Tech, the kid um,
Hmm.
from
Ramsey
Texas,
Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, right? And he was going to Ole Miss, and the other one's going to James Madison, and Duncan was going to go to Vanderbilt, right? Which is a hard place to get out of a commit and build that relationship, show them that love, tell them, I'm pretty sure they were brought in at one thing or another to the Yankees, whether it's a Zoom interview or actually go into the complex to see what they have, and then, pulling out of college because, usually when you're getting a high school kid, you're usually paying well over $300,000. And for the
I mean,
fact that they got, three of them for less than 750,000 is pretty amazing
and you
Yeah.
were just seeing over
combined.
the draft. I mean, because there was big questions about what it will be with the NIL and the MLB draft potentially changing, and there were so many high school kids taken 11th through
Yeah.
20th round. And usually, when you see those guys taken in those areas, they're not signing. It seems like a lot of these guys are going to be signing.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's just a very weird draft how that happened, and it is cool to get in on it. And just one thing with Cutshall though, because Kai mentioned, I kind of wrote about his peculiar swing. You know who it reminds me of? It reminds me of a favorite of Carlos and Bobby's for the first round, Taj Marchand.
Yeah,
It's very he
absolutely.
gets on his front he gets on his front foot,
Great,
and it's
great,
a weird way. Yeah.
great job because that's why when I was looking at him a couple months ago, right? I was going to say, what's a cheaper version of Marshawn? And it was him. 100%, man.
Yeah.
100%.
So that's just why I question, he did a really good job making contact, maybe able to lift the ball in high school, which is what happens when you're up against better competition. But you can't deny, the production he had. Um, but yeah. Is it my turn to talk about my guy now?
Let's go.
All right, yeah. So the guy I want to hire first, I just want to touch on Castellanos and Potestio real quickly because we mentioned, Bayer, Harrison, and Brock being more power over hit guys. Potestio and Castellanos were two of like the very best contact hitters in college. So, they give some nice floor there. It's just a question of what can the Yankees get power wise out of them because that'll be the real development kicker. But you think of a guy like Brendan Jones who was very much in that mold, and they started helping him get some more power that helped him become the second main piece of that Ryan Weathers trade. So, they're definitely two exciting guys who are athletic and have some intrigue to them. But I'm going to talk about Austin Bergeron, uh, nicknamed as Berg. Uh, he is. I'm very interested in him because he's a senior sign. He's going to be 23 when he's turning 23 in September, and he, was a closer at Miami, Ohio. But I'm very interested to see what they do with him. This could very much be that reliever to starter transition if they want to do it, or they could have him be a reliever, and he could be in the big leagues. Honestly, as soon as the end of 27, maybe he'd be on that Ben Grable path. I think he's that dominant, but just stuff wise, he's main three main pitches are the four seamer, the cutter, and the slider. The four seam is 92, 94, but it has 8 inches of inverted vertical break, which you heard me talk about 100 Dietz earlier. He had 17, 18. Usually, a fastball is like 15 to 20, 20 on the high end. This guy throws 8. This is not an ordinary fastball. This is basically a cutter almost. Um, it's a very unique uh, angle that when the hitters see a fastball, it's not what they expect. So the fastball acts like a cutter. Then you have the 89 to 91 cutter that has roughly 3,000 RPMs, which is a lot of spin. That acts like a slider. Then you have the slider in the mid 80s with over 3,000 RPMs. That's basically having 14 inches of horizontal movement. It's basically acting like a sweeper. So this guy just has this really strange outlier stuff. And then he has a sinker and a changeup he's used in college, but never really developed fully. But for sure the Yankees are gonna get on that. And it's just, I find him is so interesting. He really kind of is Jack Siebert coded. He had a 32K percent, 6.8 walk percent. He was a pretty good strike thrower in college as a reliever. I don't know where they're going to use him out of. Like I said, I could see them maybe they have him come out of the bullpen if they pitch him to end this season, but then have him start next year. I'm really not sure, but he's so intriguing. I love guys who have outlier stuff that you don't see typically. Mac Hewer's a guy like that. Obviously, he had struggles with command when he was healthy, but Berggren really excites me as a guy who could fly as a reliever or be another really interesting starter. Guy to take from reliever to starter.
Yeah, I love the idea of giving different looks too. So, I mean, that all those unique traits are really great to have as part of the system.
I love how excited Aaron is about him. That's how I know I should be excited.
Yeah, that's very true.
Listen, I'm not gonna, I'm waiting to see what happens at the trade deadline. I've updated my top. Honestly, it's like 75 now. I have updated my top 30, and uh, Berggren could or could not be in that top 30 when I publish after the trade deadline. So,
Have to go to the website
I'm
and
very
see.
high on him.
All right, so that the last round of the draft for the Yankees, round 16, Garrett Ahern, a right-handed pitcher from Grand Canyon. The 17th round, Jason Krieger, a right-handed pitcher from Maine. Blake Sear in the 18th round, an outfielder from Florida. 19th round, you have Tice Armstrong, first baseman from Baylor. And in the 20th round, Dean, it's either Toigo or maybe I just said it right, an outfielder from Arizona State. So it's typical probably for a draft from a fan standpoint to not know much about the guys who are at the back end of it. But let's chime in if there's anything that stands out about this group of players here. And I
It's
hope nobody, if we don't go deep on every player, that doesn't mean that
Mm.
there's nothing to talk about.
I was gonna say Blake, what is how you say name, Sire?
I think it's Sear, and I only know that
Here.
from watching some highlights.
It's just it's really funny because if this was 3 years ago, he would have been a top 50 pick. He had a great freshman year at the University of Miami, and then it just like went kind of downhill. This year, he kind of rebounded. He was a senior. He's going to be 23 next year. He's played second base. He's played the outfield. It's really going to be interesting where they put him. I think he's going to be a player that he either fails or they pull a lot of potential out of him, and you're going to be like, wow, what's going on? He could be, in a year or two, someone they put into a trade. So it's going to be quite interesting what kind of path he takes.
Yeah, and he looks like a guy who gets after it too. And sometimes that's just a really good player to have in your system. Again, don't want to sell him short, but that type of player, it's a good teammate. It's a guy that you want to
Yeah,
compete with.
From him and Armstrong, I just like my biggest takeaway is just college production guys that did very well at especially Sear at two very good levels in the SEC and ACC. And then Armstrong with Baylor, he's a power guy. Obviously, he's hitting a lot of homers. I think it was his first year with Baylor. So I just like a late round value. Like when I was thinking about this, like it's so awesome to look back and that Jackson Lovich is a 16th rounder last year, and then I'm just like, who next year could give me, 17 homers at this time of the year? Like those are two guys, or like maybe not 17, but Armstrong, like those are guys that like I could just see like, oh wow, like we got some crazy. It just seems some early crazy value out of them after they had productive years at college. They were productive college players that did it at good levels. So. I just like seeing those type of players. Like obviously, they're gonna sign, and you're gonna get what you get with them, and sometimes that's good. So I'm just excited to see where they can end up, and if we have anybody in the 15 to 20 that ends up exactly like Lovich, where we're just like, wow, like awesome to see.
Yeah, and to your point, these recent years have shown us that we shouldn't ignore
There's so
any of
much
these draft
value.
picks,
Yeah.
right? This is not there's nothing to see here. They're just taking minor league filler players. That's not the case.
yeah.
So,
Like guys we like Seaver, like guys we could talk about seriously in the next 8 months. Like so
right.
um
Yeah, these
Listen,
roster
I'm
spots are
gonna
precious. So we should pay attention to all these players.
I'm gonna recount the last three 16th round picks for the Yankees. 23 was Andrew Landry, who, after having a bit of a tough start as a starter, really found his stride last year. Sam Breen talked about him being a guy who got his velocity up. Struggled to start this year because they moved him to the bullpen and kind of were using him in lengthy roles. And but then, I think it was sometime in middle of May they just started using him as a one inning guy, and he's taken off. He looks tremendous. He looks if he's throwing 98, I'm not sure what he's throwing because we don't have the StatCast data.
Yeah.
But if he's throwing that 98 that Breen said he was getting up to, that's a legitimate bullpen arm.
Hmm.
Then you had in 24 Xavier Rivas, who I have as a top 15 arm, top 15 player in the system. Nasty slider, sinker combination, slider, splitter combination. Fastball velocity has been an issue as well as getting it in the zone. But if he can't make it as a starter, he's going to be a really good reliever. I'm certain of that. Then last year, Jackson Lovich, the hit tool is definitely a question. He's really struggled to make consistent contact at low A, but the power is just crazy, and he's a really good athlete. Like Bobby has mentioned, this guy could play short, he could play third. I don't know what I wouldn't say he has the highest probability right now, but if he does, he's kind of like a poor man Spencer Jones. If he kind of does make the hit tool click, it's the guy who's going to hit for a lot of power. So I say all that to get to Garrett Ahern, who we took in the 16th rounder this year. This very much fits the Yankees pitcher mold that I've been talking about. Guys with low release slot with unique traits in their arms. This guy, he's a sinker, cutter, sweeper, changeup. So he's very east-west. Sinker and cut and changeup both fading to the right, cutter and sweeper both going to the arm side. And I watched, it's hard to get footage, too much footage from Grand Canyon, but his sinker, there were some of those that had some serious inside run that was just killing hitters' hands. Um, he definitely looks like he has some very interesting traits to work with. and he's only 21. He's not an old prospect either. And it's just, he fits that Yankee mold so well. I love that East-West profile, and we'll see what happens when they get their hands on him. But then also Jason Krieger in the 17th round. He is a he's more of an over the top delivery guy, but he has a very funky delivery. He brings his leg up weird, he brings his leg down weird. It's a lot to, kind of throw a hitter off. And his coach said he was up to 97, 98 with the fastball. I'm not sure how true that is, but I do wonder, maybe with all that going on in his delivery, maybe there are some inefficiencies that the Yankees can iron out and get more consistent velocity from him, and help him find a more consistent arm slot when throwing. So it's definitely two very interesting college pitchers who we're both junior. They're both 21 still, so they still got time in development. And then I guess to close things out, Dean Toigo, like you mentioned, it was going to be 24 in September. This is just another guy that produced in college. You get him, Ciaran Armstrong, hope that they can add some, depth to the offense in the minor leagues. And then if you find something more out of them, all the better. But these are guys you want to get in there and help those lineups hit.
Yeah. And so on that theme that every one of these draft picks should be taken seriously, the same holds true for the undrafted free agents that the Yankees signed. And this is a big class, even for an organization who recently has been very successful at signing undrafted free agents. Nine of them is a big number. And I'll try to go through the names here really quickly. AJ Hutchison from Oregon State, it's a right-handed pitcher. This young man's name, I'm sorry, I'm just going to spell it because I don't want to say it wrong here, but it's spelled Jorsixt, and Jimenez is his last name. He's an outfielder from Tennessee Tech. Zach Johnston, a right-handed pitcher from Wake Forest. Josh Newell, a right-handed pitcher from Lindenwood. Micah New, an outfielder from Arkansas. Tice Peterson, I guess that's two Tices for the Yankees. Third baseman from San Diego State. Peyton Sosky, a right-handed pitcher from Columbia. Easton Tate, an outfielder from Oregon State. So there's two Oregon State guys. And Max Weissvilla, a left-handed pitcher from Northern Illinois. So out of that group here, I think there is a familiar name, Bobby.
Yeah, Micah knew I think he should have been drafted. Like it wouldn't surprise me if Micah New was drafted in like the sixth round, right? Or in the seventh round, but he went undrafted. He could clearly play center field. He played in a big program with 100 Deeds at Arkansas. He started his career at Marshall. I would say he's got some pop, maybe 15 plus pop, but he's a defensive center fielder, seems to making contact. He's like, we were talking about Jackson Lovich, right? Wouldn't surprise me if he has that kind of, I don't want to say that kind of power, but he has a very successful season next year. They did draft, or they did sign last year as a draft a free agent, Logan Maxwell. Am I correct? Who is in still low A and got
Mhm.
hurt. Did put up some pop, but he's on and off again from the I guess the IL. But I'm pretty fascinated. Like he's someone that Overslot had around. I think he was like number 400 in their ranking, which is pretty high if you think about it. And
Mhm.
like I said, he was higher ranked than I think Contreras was. And
And
Contreras goes from
if you consider guys who, went back to college or didn't or decided to go to college out of high school, he's probably, when you take out those guys, he's probably, in that top within the top 400.
Yeah. So I mean, like he could have been picked a lot earlier. Why he fell, I don't know, but I assume that he signed for 150K. That I don't know that's a fact or not, but I think the Yankees are not cheap when they sign their undrafted free agent. So um, it's going to be interesting to see what he becomes.
I will
Yeah.
just say he's probably the outfield version of Jackson Lovich.
Yeah,
Big power, big power, and that's what you're betting on right now because the swing decisions and the contact are not good. But a 28% strikeout rate in college is not pretty. But you're talking about a guy who has huge power in a
he had
demon in
what
the
15
outfield,
this
and
year.
10 home runs. He had
10.
15 the year before at
Yeah,
Marshall,
Marshall,
but
that's what he
I
was.
mean, when you're talking about a UDFA, that's such a high upside to get undrafted.
Yeah.
You can't there's no complaints about it. Yeah.
And when it comes to the Yankees and UDFAs, it's not like we could just point to one name and say, yeah, don't forget there was this guy. We can
I
put
mean,
up
this
what, eight, nine, 10 names
Yeah.
right now just from the last
I mean,
3 years.
just looking at last year, Tyler Boudreau is a guy who's
Yeah.
been starting. He's been the best starter in Tampa. I mean, obviously we could say this on a lot of guys, but I feel like he's probably top five most deserving of a promotion. He's been great for them. And then Eric Genther, he was a guy who was a high contact guy, and he's been showing pop recently. He's gets me excited as a guy who could be a strong side platoon catcher.
Double digit homers now, homered
Yeah,
tonight.
it's 10 now. He's been on fire since the end of May. And Rafael Flores is a big part of but he helped us. He's the reason we got Bednar, basically. That's who the
Yeah.
Pirates wanted. Dil Hasa was part of the trade for um Ryan Weathers. Garrett Martin's a guy, gosh, we talk about some of the issues with the pro team right now. Garrett Martin hadn't got hurt, he's
Yeah.
a guy I would
Unfortunate.
love to see in right field right now because he can defend it better than Jason, and he has a pretty damn good bat. So yeah, it's been a lot of good.
I
I
think,
guess the guy I want to talk about though, when you talk about go on, Bobby.
no, go, you go, and I'll go right after you. Seriously.
All right. When we talk about, obviously we talk about these UDFAs that turned out well. Most of these guys, especially like pitching side that you get, are guys who are college relievers that, they're coming in to, help beef out the back of these games. They're more organizational depth. But Peyton Sosky out of Columbia,
Yeah.
he is not that. He is a guy who has some very interesting stuff, but was just never healthy. Um, he missed. Oh, he suffered a season-ending injury that cost him all of 25 and most of his 24 season, and he made through 19 innings out of the bullpen for Columbia this year. And he's had pitched very little, like even less than Luke Pettit. Pettit at least had a full freshman season and part of I guess the first like 10 innings of sophomore year. But he has, a 91, 92 mile per hour sinker that's touched 96. The Yankees love their sinker. He's a high 80s slider. He has it's solid. He has spotty, but fringe average command. It's a very underdeveloped prospect, but there's upside there. Like this is a guy, if he was healthy, he maybe is a guy who gets drafted because he had performed for 3 years in college, but he didn't have that luck. But it just, it's a benefit to the Yankees that they picked this guy up, and there's a lot to work with, and he could be the Tyler Boudreau type because he's a guy who does have some outlier stuff that we were able to scoop up late.
All right. So 29 new players. There is a downside to it, like we discussed earlier, that there's just going to be some players who leave the organization to bring these new guys in. That's a discussion for another day. Is there anything we missed about the draft class, the UDFAs? Any closing thoughts you guys want to chime in with before we wrap up?
I just want to just piggyback on what you just said. Like, I know I've been doing drafts and following drafts for almost 40 years, right? And I think more than ever, as much as we love these picks, we want to see them develop and stuff. Maybe because I'm older and I'm getting more, a little more,
Sentimental?
I don't want to use the word sentimental, but more like more realistic and stuff.
Senile?
These guys are just trade chips. These guys are just trade chips for the most part, unless they stand out. One thing I do want to say is compared to maybe the past years, where you see it with Rice, you see it with Schlittler, you see it with Warren, they're giving chances to players outside the top few rounds. So if you do have, they used to do that with pitchers all the time. I think David Robinson was like in the 14th or 15th round, if you remember back then, and they got him. That's when the draft was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Um, relief pitchers are different, but they're giving kids a shot. So if you're performing and you could do the job, you're not. That's why I always say it's going to be this is how I look at it. After the trade deadline, you're going to see who they really like.
Yeah.
because the ones who are still in the organizations, you could see that they have some kind of potential in their eyes.
My last thing about the draft would be Bobby and Aaron both mentioned it, but the CBA, like, and the original proposal was what, cutting it down to 12 rounds or whatever, but it's like it's hard for me to think of that again, and or what that's going to look like, or
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about some guys that could seriously make some type of impact, or be Loviches or whatever, for that example, or Sieverts, or the late round guys that making a serious impact. And so I'm very pro not cutting the draft, but
Yeah.
even more than it is now. So a lot of these guys deserve shots and could become guys, and definitely. I was just wondering how you guys might think this year impacted, or if there's anything different, or especially with like just the thought that there at least might be less rounds in the coming years.
I mean, I definitely think, going for high school, get kids
Yeah.
is, I don't, obviously they didn't go for, like Bobby said, they're kind of looking more in towards that, like outside of the top 100 ranked high school artists. Besides Sean Duncan, he was, a
Yeah.
top 25 high school player, if not higher. It was a potential first round pick. But I think part of that, they said, hey, maybe it's our last chance to get this. And I like it because it's giving a different look. These are guys you're going to be more patient with. Wilson Rodriguez, they got in 2023. And it wasn't really till like he didn't make his full league debut till last year, like late into the summer. He didn't debut till in Tampa. And now he's a guy who I think is, probably a consensus top 30 prospect. Um, so it's just cool to see them kind of hit that avenue again and hit it, multiple times. Um, I am very excited to see Garrison Cutshall, even though I really doubt we'll see them until next year. So I definitely think that was a part of the NIL, or just the potential changes to the draft that they kind of pursued more high school players.
Totally forgot that they were going to cut high school kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We'll
Marcus,
see.
Yeah.
yeah, I think Marcus and I will remember this, but prior to 2019, it was literally taking a dart and throwing it on the board when it came to the Yankees draft. They have in the past 7 years, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, have made it a science on drafting to the point where I don't question anything. It was literally that pathetic when I was seeing drafts and players that I like I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. And I think the reason why we saw 20 or so more players leave the organization last year is because prior year's drafts. So, to say that they're drafting like a science, they're drafting like a science, and it's going to be really fascinating to see what this organization looks like on August the 4th, because that will determine the next 12 months.
Yeah, I can't sort it all out in my head. You start thinking about how the league is continually trying to kill itself and kill it's putting up barriers to entry and all these things. Bunch of people who are billionaires who have no idea how to grow a baseball business. I don't want to get down that road, but I start thinking about, we came into the year hoping that there would be a lot of talent in the DSL, and there is. You had a good complex league team. You've got all these guys coming in now from the draft and undrafted free agents, and there's only 165 domestic roster spots to have. So that I don't know what to make of that other than what Bobby said. We're going to see some turnover here via the trade deadline and otherwise here. But it's you can't just collect players anymore. They have to have somewhere to play and somewhere to be. So what we have to take all these guys seriously instead of just let's bring it's not like running a D1 football program. Give this kid a scholarship and he's our fourth string middle linebacker, and maybe he can play in 3 years. I mean, these guys have precious roster spots, and that's what part of what makes them so interesting to me. So, and as Yankee fans, we love all of them. So we're happy to have them. All right, guys, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who watched. And make sure you go to the website, take a look at Aaron's prospect notebook, and get a little deeper look at all these draft picks. And we'll keep an eye out for guys popping up, hopefully in the league before the year is out. So Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you guys. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye bye. Thank you.